I wanted to take my entrepreneurial journey to the next level. And I knew if I wanted to do that, I had to get out of Australia. I realize now anything that I desire, if I really put my mind to it and I do the hard thing, it just comes out the other side tenfold. It's very much a holistic community where we're trying to support every part of the ecosystem. He goes, Ella, I think you're such an incredible human. What would it look like if I wanted to invest 10 to 20 million into DFX? He was projecting all of the things that she did to him to me.
Are you able to take care of yourself?
Right now, it's very challenging.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Many Firsts, the podcast where we explore the power of first-time experiences and share inspirational and transformative moments in our lives. I'm your host, Regula Fischer, and I'm super excited to be here in the studio live with Ella Maloney-Cook. Welcome, Ella.
Thank you. I just flew in and Jennifer's getting ready. She looks beautiful. And I was like, wait, I can't be late for the podcast. But you know what's funny is I just got a new phone. So I'm going through the process of setting everything up. And it's actually really refreshing, like being in a new country with a new phone, with new friends, like on a new experience. So I'm excited to be here.
That's super good. We can already, I think, go into that. Yeah. So is it your first time here?
Yeah, it's my first time in Portugal. I've been to Europe a couple of times. I used to work in Mykonos when I was like 18, 19. Mm-hmm. But I moved to the States only 2 years ago. So haven't been doing much international travel since moving to the States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you said at 18, 19 you were in Mykonos. Mm-hmm. I know that. I mean, currently you are the co-founder of Deal Flow Exchange, DFX, which is a platform that transforms the way individuals and businesses raise capital. However, that's not your first business. I think at the age of 19 was when you actually created and successfully so your first business. So how come that Ella thought at the age of 19, let's build a business? And Mykonos was there obviously somehow as well. How does that?
Yeah, actually it's so funny because me and my partner at the time, we love to work out. We love to go on these holidays, but stay healthy. And so a lot of people traveling to Europe, it's just kind of like a drink fest, especially when you're young. But we always maintain to keep working out while traveling. And we realized, well, like we want to be around more like-minded people. So he had his personal training degree. I was becoming a yoga instructor. I just loved working out and connecting with people. So we then, on that Europe trip, we decided we wanted to do a retreat in Bali. And so Australians, you know, we're always going to Bali, but like, let's get a really cool group together and let's make it really wholesome. So it was really unintentional to start a business at 19, and the business model of doing retreats is kind of the worst business model because there's no solid cash flow. You're outlaying so much cost at the start. So I definitely drained a lot of money, but I learned everything by doing because I was a high school dropout, didn't go to college. But I was very determined to understand the world of business because my dad was just a really dedicated entrepreneur.
So entrepreneurship in the blood, probably we could say, as we something,
yeah. It was like a natural progression for me. And then I guess what happened was I was like, there has to be a better way for this business to be able to produce cash flow when we're not hosting these retreats, because we ended up getting into the corporate space. So we ended up partnering with a supplement brand. We ended up building out kind of like a travel equipment bundle. So we could travel and use this equipment bundle. And then we had influencers and we ended up doing like kind of like a fitness program. And then COVID happened and it blew up. So at that time, I was like just mentally struggling because there was no retreats anymore and it was just online. So it became, you know, me just sitting at the computer 12 hours a day. And like, yes, we were making great money, but for me, it was like, that wasn't enough. It wasn't feeling my purpose anymore. So a larger company ended up acquiring us. And at that time, it was super challenging because I felt like I started that company so young. So that was my identity. So then I kind of went into like this transitional period of just like kind of refinding myself.
And how was that? I mean, would you say the process is concluded, or will it ever be? But yeah, I mean, did you take the conscious decision of, okay, then let's see who else I could be, what I want to become? And was there help that you got somewhere, or how was that for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I've always had mentors, and I've always just been that natural person that was like, if I don't understand something, or if I wanted to get into investing into crypto. So that's kind of what happened after I exited my company, is I really got into investing. And so I spent a lot of my time there. I got into real estate. I was just kind of like exploring different options. And what I realized was there wasn't enough for me within that space. And I was like, I wanted to take my entrepreneurial journey to the next level. And I knew if I wanted to do that, I had to get out of Australia, because there's a sense of just very relaxation. And a lot of people, especially, the areas that I grew up, there wasn't anyone that I looked up to and I was like, that's who I want to be.
Yeah.
So I found that challenging, because I was like, oh, there's no one that really, as a woman, that I could model and like, kind of have someone to guide me. It was very much a male-dominated investing space in Australia. So that's when I took a 6-month sabbatical. I went to the States. So I kind of traveled around and then ended up in the States. And I said, if I could get a visa, I'll move there. And I got one in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is like crazy.
Crazy things happen first times, right? So that was then not your first time away, obviously, because you had been leading these retreats globally and you had lived in Mykonos, obviously. But that was then, I mean, did you just go without knowing if you would ever, or even go with thinking you may not return anytime soon to Australia?
I literally called my mom, and I had just sold my property in Australia and there was really nothing left for me there. And so I'd sold it at like the height of COVID. Everyone was, overpaying for property because there was nothing else to do. And so I said to my mom, I'm like, I'm leaving the country in 4 weeks. I don't know when I'm going to be back, but like, she was so excited for me because she got all my furniture. So she was like, new woman, new things. And so I remember leaving the country and she was still like tidying up all of my place that I was living in. So it was very much just spontaneity of like, this is just what felt right to me. And then when I got to the States, I just got involved in so many incredible people doing so many bigger things, like bigger than themselves. And their purposes were so impact driven. I was like, this is where I have to be.
And you just said before, new woman, new things. So could you describe to us who was that woman before and who is she now? Meaning you in your words and perception.
I think prior to, honestly, I feel like I've just become a new woman in the last kind of 6 months that I'm finally feeling like I'm reaching my full potential and I'm being around people that are AAA players and I feel really proud of how much I've navigated through. Previously, I really struggled with my relationship with my dad. And I feel like I've been very much focusing on my internal world with the masculine and feminine. And so being a young entrepreneur, I felt like I had to be in my masculine all the time. And I've just been looking at a lot of conscious leadership and who I want to be, like leading this new company. There's a lot more pressure. There's a lot more that, we've raised capital. There's people that have skin in the game. So I would say that this new woman that I've curated is more conscious and wholesome, and she doesn't hold back, which I'm really proud of. Not saying that I held back in the future, but I have been able to heal the relationship with my dad, which is just such a beautiful thing. And that was only like a couple of months ago. And so I think this new evolution is like, I realize now anything that I desire, if I really put my mind to it and I do the hard thing, it just comes out the other side tenfold.
Oh, this is very powerful. It's interesting that you mentioned the relationship with your father in that as well, and that very recent shift that's been happening for you. Personally, I can relate to that, and having a relationship with a father and maybe probably both parents, right? That at some point as we become adults, at least I really started reflecting on what that feels and looks like. And you mentioned that he has been an entrepreneur as well, and so I felt a bit like, again, you might be he might be a role model in that sense. Of course, he's a male, you're female, but how was that relationship then, in a way that you felt a transformation would be what you would desire? I imagine, and were you the one that kind of brought that forward?
Yeah, I think my dad thought that everything was like good. I think he knew deep down that it wasn't great, but he was like, this is fine. Like, we went on a nice trip to San Diego before going to Sedona with my like healer / therapist. And I just knew, I could feel it energetically that we were like walking around eggshells with each other. There wasn't any depth in our relationship. And so it just felt really surface level, and it felt kind of a little bit just like empty. And so when we went to Sedona, my dad was aware because he had prior conversations with my healer, and I was setting the expectation that like I really wanted to go deeper into our relationship and heal and get to know each other, because I feel like it's been so long since I've really spent a lot of quality time with him. And the retreat did not go as planned. It ended up being like, at the start, it was like so much like fire from both of our sides. And what I realized though, when he was speaking to me, he looks at me and he sees my mom, and all of my mom had me at such a young age, at like 20 years old. And so he was projecting all of the things that she did to him to me. Like, it actually, all of his issues with me actually have nothing to do with me. And so I think that the whole journey of that weekend for me was so healing, because I was like, I just have to accept him for who he is, and everything that he does incredible, and the things that maybe I wish he, could do better at, like maybe communication or anything like that. It's like, I just have to step up in those areas and be able to inner father myself, because at the end of the day, my dad's not going to change. He's going to be who he is. But I think us laying everything out on the table, it just made me realize like his kind of like lens of the world and where he's coming from. And like deep down at a core level, he just wants love. And I feel like he's felt abandoned. I felt abandoned at times. And even though he was an incredible father, it doesn't mean that like my feelings aren't valid. Yeah. So it was a super interesting experience, because I feel like I just had like an internal shift when now our like frequency of communication, and I think it was also him seeing me today as like what I'm doing today helped. Like, it wasn't me going back and visiting him in Australia. It was him coming into my world now.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting aspect. And also that you had a weekend. You mentioned briefly that you realized that you may not have had a lot of quality time with him. And there, it sounds to me like you really took the time, both of you, right? You committed, you spent time with each other. And was that a retreat for, let's say, a bigger group, or was it really you and him and a guide in that sense?
Yep, it was. So we just went out to Sedona. It was incredible. Like, just the energy out there. It was so healing. And there were some parts that my dad didn't want to take part in, which was fine, because me and my healer, Janelle, she's incredible. We just went and did, a cacao ceremony. We like naked swam in the creek. Like, we did all the things that we wanted to do. And sometimes my dad couldn't. He was obviously processing what was happening. which just took him longer, which at the time was super hard. But at the end, it was like a different shift. And I realized like I have such high expectations for myself, and sometimes I project that onto him. And so me just accepting him has just made our relationship, I don't know, it's just like energetically different.
It's beautiful how you describe that. And I hear the accepting him, and somehow I felt as if the sentence continues and accepting myself. But
yeah.
I'm not sure how you have been feeling about yourself in your life so far, you know, how sure and confident you've been. I mean, you come across as very, sure of what we're doing, what your visions are maybe sometimes, I understand the redefining, right? Reassessing where I am, where I want to go. But still very clear. But how does it feel for yourself to be with yourself?
Yeah, I think that there's parts of myself that I definitely like shame. Like I think the parts that are really determined and are maybe a little bit cutthroat at times. But that's also, I realized like that was me being an only child and like the survival skills. So I'm learning to not judge myself as much. And the times that I do slip up, whether that's in business or my personal life, giving myself more compassion. But I think it's only just recently that I disintegrated, like literally probably in the last like 2 weeks, my imposter syndrome. So that's been huge for me.
And how did that happen? Was there something that helped?
So actually, it's funny because Jennifer introduced me to Neri. And I think because I don't have a financial background, I don't come from an alumni school. You know, there's a lot of people in the private capital world that have all these impressive accolades. I don't have any of that. So I think for me, it was like, who am I to be a co-founder of a very disruptive company that is like the oldest industry in the world, which is finance. So that was really challenging for me. And especially being young and being a female, I think, you know, you walk into those rooms and it's majority white men. And so sometimes, you know, you very much are putting on this like, I've got this, like I've exited a company, but it's in a completely different industry. But I had a conversation with Neri, and it was very much a 45-minute conversation of just like our values, what we believe in, you know, what we're proud of, where we want to go in life, and just a very wholesome conversation. And then at the end, he was like, tell me more about DFX. And we went into it. And he goes, Ella, I think you're such an incredible human. What would it look like if I wanted to invest 10 to 20 million into DFX? We had spoken about Deal Flow Exchange for 5 minutes. It was the most casual, you know, like I wasn't like even doing it as like a pitch. It was just like, this is what it does, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, it was just a moment where I was like, he's not investing into DFX. He's investing because of who I am and what I believe in. So that was a moment for me where I was like, wow, like he, you know, came from Harvard, like all the different things, right? Is doing a private equity, you know, roll up and all these different incredible things. And I was like, wow, this man was like so intrigued by who I was as a person. So that for me was just like a very transformational moment where I'm like, I am a force to be reckoned with, even if I don't come from the places that, you know, traditionally most people in this world do.
That's very encouraging, right? For everyone else to step into for the first time into, a new field, to become an expert in that. The disruption you're mentioning, how does that feel for you to be creating something to disrupt?
If I'm honest, there's a part of you that always feels a little bit like, I don't know what the word is, but there's people that come from the big boys. So we're targeting the lower to middle market. And then there's like, you know, very large transactions. And they kind of look at you and they're like, that's cool. That's cute. Like, you know, that you're doing something that you need a lot of traction. And so our business model is really interesting because I used to work with a investment bank and they would charge upfront 6-figure fees for due diligence without anything on the back end to actually show that they can provide the capital. So I was sending them deal flow. They would charge the upfront fees. They weren't able to get the capital. So it was very weird to me because it was a billionaire that owned this investment bank. And I was like, why does he not care that he's taking all of this money from these people that generally need the capital for their businesses? That's people's livelihoods. And it was just like a fun game to him. And so what we do at DFX, if you're raising capital, it's $10 per month and it's nothing on the upside, which most people, if you're raising capital for someone, they're taking anywhere from 3 to 10% and they're charging you an upfront retainer. We charge the bank or the lender 1% on all debt transactions. But how we position ourselves is the social media of private capital, which means instead of thoughts and feelings and influences, it's constant deal flow from all around the world with the right strategic capital. But our go-to-market strategy is really interesting because we private label our platform for pre-established investment networks. So our first group that did our first private label, they had 300 family offices a part of their network. So it's just we have a very different business model than most people within this kind of like marketplace capital raising space.
And how did you come up with that model?
Yeah, so I didn't actually come up with it. Our founder and CEO, Jesse, that was his, you know, he built the entire platform himself. I came in about 4 months ago. And so the platform's only been live since March. But what I said to him was like, I know that I just believed in this so much because of my own experience in the space and the people that were getting ripped off and I also feel like for being a woman, this evens out the playing field because the capital provider reaches out to the opportunity, which means it's a very different energy exchange because they're not looking at who you are as a person necessarily. They're looking at the economics of your deal, which is very different to how people like normally go and raise capital. So it's offering anyone who's needing, whether it's debt or equity, the opportunity to take a bet on their deal.
And it's not necessarily what you're describing before, that you would go in person and pitch in front of a group of a certain audience.
We do that.
For the effects, right?
Yeah.
But the people who you have on the platform, your clients basically, who need the capital, they would also still do it with you then or with?
Yeah. So what we're seeing as DFX is a tool to be able to showcase your deal to people that maybe you will never be able to get in contact with. Example, a family office.
Yeah.
So for them, it's kind of giving you, it's very much giving you the optionality on different types of investors because we have accredited lenders, family offices. But if I reach out to you and I'm like, Reggie, I really want to invest in your podcast. Like, I love what you're doing. It's so different for you being like, hey, Ella, I need $100,000 for my podcast.
Yeah.
It's it's like putting the driver's seat to you, which I think is like, I've had people from my newsletter be like, hey, I really want to invest in DFX. That feeling is like, you're on top of the world.
Yeah. And I totally get now what you're saying about the change in the energy, right? Also, as someone looking for the capital, you feel less kind of begging, needy and whatever at times that you may feel like that, right? Or just hoping.
Exactly. And then a lot of these investors, they get all of this deal flow, but it's actually not their criteria. So now the investors can come on and search for what is their investment thesis, not being solicited by hundreds of thousands of decks that really maybe only 10% of them are even something that they would look at.
Understand. So is that also connected to you moving then now? I mean, you were in the US before you moved you've moved to Europe.
No, haven't moved to Europe, just here visiting Jennifer, but we are an international platform. So next year, it's very much me focusing on following conferences, our own events, and pretty much building a community everywhere we've gone this year. We had an event in Dallas, we had an event in New York, Scottsdale, one other, I forget. But every time we launch one of these events and we get the capital providers and the deal flow together, that's where the magic really happens, is like it's humanizing the deal flow exchange platform.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And I'm looking forward then to the next year and see how this is growing. Would you also be planning events in Europe then?
Yes. We actually have a blockchain community that's launching. He's Australian, but he's very well known in the space, and he's in Europe. We have our largest private label on the platform. They have a head office in London, so they're going to be doing events out there. And then we have the Debachi Group, which is a Dubai family office. So we already have a global footprint. It's really us just next year ramping that up.
Mm-hmm. And with us again, you mean you and your co-founder?
Yeah.
And how did you meet?
Yeah, it was incredible. We met not physically, but we met at an event through a Slack channel. And there was so many people at this event, but I had heard of what he was doing and I was really interested. And he knew that I was with this investment bank at the time. And so this investment bank is kind of well known in the space. And so he was really intrigued on like how they could collaborate together. I was just really honest about my experience with them. And so that's what I loved about DFX is like Jesse has this vision of being able to make capital more efficient and more affordable. And you think about the new age of you're getting all of these crypto investors, these tech investors, they don't want to get emails back and forth, a Google Drive. They want to have it in a way that's an appetite where they can easily be able to log in and have their pipeline and be able to communicate with different deal flow in all different sectors. Like for me, I like impact investing, M&A, and I also like early stage tech. So I can be a part of multiple communities that I know the community director and it's a small network, but there's a different kind of energy when you're inside of these communities because the community director accepts or denies who comes inside. So you can have a community that's just 500 people for women impact investors.
And how would you do that then? That you would find, if I come in, I would be looking what communities there are.
Right.
And can I kind of with criteria or so, or it sounds like wish list I can.
Yeah,
it sounds amazing. Yeah.
So inside of DFX, we have multiple networks. So there could be a network that's specifically just around women, around blockchain, and you can apply to join that network. And that community director, the owner of that network, will either accept or deny. So there's some communities that don't allow brokers or investment banks, and it's specifically just independent sponsors and capital providers. So it's interesting of how we've done this because we built out their own application for them. But if you're logging into DFX, you're still able to go inside of all those communities, even though those communities download their own application that's branded to their network. And that's why our go-to-market strategy is so unique because they push out their own application so hard because it's like they're proud of that.
Yeah. Community is still the power. There's nothing that beats the power of community in the end. And it's interesting how platform technology and the human connection in that sense still is brought in, and how must be a good feeling to see how it's evolving and
and like the doors that have been opened for us, like the amount, we have a wait list of communities and the quality of the communities are like incredible. And so for us only being live to the public for 6 months, it's just been, I don't know, we've just very much built a community that is an ecosystem that people really want to be a part of because they know how hard it is to raise capital, but also find good quality investors.
And then also projects, right? In terms of, we talk sustainability as a lot these days. And where do you really want to be in, what space, and where should the people building these businesses be in. So yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. And then like what we've done is we've built a whole central event calendar for all different events in the space. And so those private labels can just focus on, say, impact events. And you can have one calendar that you go into, and then you get thousands of dollars of discounts on service providers as well. So whether that's tech, HR. So it's very much a holistic community where we're trying to support every part of the ecosystem. And there is a place for brokers and advisors and consultants. We're just not letting them solicit founders and take advantage of them.
And how is that if someone joins the platform or the big community, DFX in that sense, newly? Is there a way to learn how to navigate? It still sounds quite, there's probably a lot to discover in there. So is there some guidance when you say you support the members, the clients, and how do you do that? Yeah,
so we have a DFX office hours that Jesse and one of our team members, we kind of host them every week on a Wednesday. So anyone that's newly joined, whether they have any questions, whether they're a community director, can jump in and ask questions. But then we've built out a whole kind of like training module. So that goes through kind of what vertical you are and kind of that step-by-step process with video and words. But then we host, in-person events, probably like once to twice every month in a different location. And that's where we really like to be able to also provide that education part as well, because it's very new, it's very innovative. And there is definitely some old school people that won't adopt it, and they'll get their team to instead. But the generation that appreciates technology and making things more efficient are loving it, because it's giving them the opportunity to be able to even out their playing field on getting the right capital providers' eyes on their deal, and they're only paying $10 per month. It's a cup of coffee.
Yeah, depending on where you live, definitely. Yeah. Yes. Talking of cup of coffees, do you drink coffee?
I do. Yeah, I love coffee. I've actually, for the first time the other day, I took a nicotine gum, which. I had a cup of coffee, and one of my like good mentors, he was like, just try it, Ella, I'm curious. He's like, go and like get into some deep work. And it was so interesting. I like zoned in. I've never really been into like nicotine, but yeah, that was an interesting first for me yesterday before I got on the plane.
A gum. So isn't that what people would take when they cannot smoke, because we're in spaces where it's not allowed, for example? Then you would take a gum.
Yeah, but he just takes it because it's actually a neuro I don't know how to say that word, but it's like a nootropic. I wouldn't know either, I guess. It's like a natural, like apparently if you take a very small piece of nicotine, it's actually not bad for you. It actually stimulates you, and it's actually a positive effect, which I knew of, but I was like, I didn't realize that it made you actually focus in.
So you took that before you boarded a flight and a cross ocean, cross, you know what I mean, but cross continent flight.
Yeah, and I got so much work done.
I just wanted to ask that. Yeah, that's amazing. So you basically didn't sleep last night.
I had probably a couple hours, but not much.
How is that with your health? You seem to be able, coming from the wellness, fitness, yoga and so world, are you able to be to take care of yourself? Is that really something you prioritize? And or does it sometimes also get deprioritized with everything else that's going on?
Right now, it's very challenging just because we're moving so quickly, and I'm like pretty much hiring someone every single day.
Wow.
So it's like a lot of energy to be building new relationships with people and explaining, everything that we're doing. So yeah, I will say that I'm not proud that my like health and fitness journey has not been a priority this year, but I've also just like accepted that that's a season that I had to go through in order to build out like a really solid operating system. And being in the COO role, Jesse right now, he is the whole development team. So he builds out these applications within 3 hours every time we launch a new one. So he very much needs to be focused on the platform and development, and I very much need to be doing everything else. So it's a lot right now, but I actually am planning out 2025 to have someone that's specifically focused in like plant-based medicine and looking after like my fitness, but also like different retreats that I want to go to as well. Because if I schedule it out, I then can like let my team know ahead of time and prioritize me, which this year just like we didn't have the capital personally. And so we actually just raised $2.2 million yesterday for DFX. So
also that happened while you were in flight or similar?
No, it happened. So wait, it wasn't yesterday. It was the day before. Yeah. So that happened. We had a private equity firm that pretty much loves what we're doing and wants to be our capital partner. And the part of that is it's a strategic investment for them because they want their own private label. They see the power of, because you think about it, even with the private labels, we have you ever heard of Insperity? It's a publicly traded HR platform that they took Netflix up to 5,000 employees. And so they've been around since like 1986. And so they have a private equity and venture capital division. So for them, they want a private label because the ability to have the data to know when companies get funded, then they know when to go in and put their HR resources. Yeah, so it's very interesting. It's not always traditional like investment groups. There are groups that selfishly want it because they want to be able to support their community, but also it's deal flow for them, for their own pipeline.
It's that meta level. Interesting. I see that so many things are opening up in front of you and to dive in. But it's what you're saying about the relationship piece. In the end, every business is also a people business, right? At least what we used to say. Maybe we're in a transition now and that may change. But that this is the thing that takes the energy, right? Because we give it, but then if we want to get, we first give. So. Yeah. But I think it's nice what you're saying in terms of there's different seasons we go through, right? And not get too tense if at some point some things maybe get deprioritized a bit, as long as we can still get them back in and up. And as I see, you're already setting intentions for next year. I'm wondering, I mean, this includes quite a number of firsts, I would assume, for next year. Obviously, there's DFX, and I heard you say that, you're explaining a lot these days about what you do with DFX. So we've also spent a lot of time about, maybe we go into something else, some other firsts. You mentioned retreats. What is one or two firsts that you want to create as of moving into next year?
It's a really good question. I think I would really like to, a first that I want to create in my personal life is being consistent with like different types of like dance and movement. I'm really into Afro music at the moment. And I really like that community and I really appreciate just like their expression. And I think I'm just a very multifaceted human and I can live 9 lives in one. And I think that there's a lot of like internal expression that I want to have because I'm in my 20s. I feel like, a large portion of my life has been being an entrepreneur and dedicating, like sacrificing, a lot of things that people want to do in their 20s. And so I think the things that I want to do is more around just like liberating myself, but in like a more community-based environment.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? I have a feeling of what you're saying. Why was it not so community-based or in the past? Or
I think I just like I've only recently been able to find my tribes, like, and so I think that also comes with just like knowing yourself more and like what's important to you, and like alcohol and drinking and all of that isn't important to me, but like I love being around like multifaceted humans where you can have a conversation about spirituality, business, like dancing, yoga, ayahuasca. Like that's how multifaceted I am. And so I really appreciate that, but that's not a very society topic to talk about. Like you normally are like, as a woman, it's like, you've got to be in this like lane.
True.
So
Yeah, I'm super curious to see what that evolution will have ready for you. And thank you very much for being here today, straight from a flight and basically the airport, and share about your passions and the many facets of your life. Thank you so much, Ella.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. If you liked today's episode, it would mean the world to us. If you like it, share it with your friends, family, or anyone who could need a boost in courage. We would also love to hear from you. What are your reflections, your dreams and visions? Please share them in the comments. And let's keep creating healthy, functional firsts together. I'll see you next first time. Until then, much love and courage. Ciao.